The day my son brought her home was the day my heart first whispered a warning I should have heeded. The air was sweet with the scent of fresh-baked apple pie when Luke's truck pulled into our farmhouse driveway. I'd spent all morning preparing, wanting everything perfect for this girl who'd captured my only son's heart. Tiffany stepped out of the passenger side, all designer clothes and careful smiles, city girl through and through. "Mom, this is Tiffany," Luke beamed, his arm protectively around her shoulders. "The one I've been telling you about." I wiped my flour-dusted hands on my apron and opened my arms. "Welcome to our home, honey." Her hug was stiff perfunctory. When she pulled back, her eyes scanned our modest farmhouse, lingering on the worn porch swing, the faded curtains, the simple garden I'd tended for 30 years. Something flickered across her face. Disappointment? Judgment? Before her practiced smile returned. "It's so quaint," she said, the word hanging between us like a silk-wrapped insult. That night, I served the family recipes that had sustained generations of love around my table. Luke devoured everything, telling stories of his childhood, how I'd taught him to fish in the creek behind our property. Tiffany picked at her food, pushing it around her plate. "Is something wrong with the roast, dear?" I asked gently. "Oh, I'm just watching my figure," she laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "In the city, we're more conscious about organic, sustainable food options." Luke jumped to her defense. "Tiff works at this amazing marketing firm downtown. She knows all about the latest trends." I nodded and smiled, but something in me sensed the divide growing already. This girl saw our simple country life as backward, primitive. Still, when Luke announced their engagement over dessert, I hugged them both and promised to help however I could. "We're thinking a small wedding," Luke said. "Actually," Tiffany interjected, pulling out her phone to show a Pinterest board of elaborate ceremony ideas. "I've always dreamed of something special." That night, after they'd gone to bed, I sat alone on the porch, watching the fireflies dance across the field. My late husband and I had worked together for 40 years. A heaviness settled in my chest, something about the way Tiffany looked at Luke, possessive rather than loving. The way she'd subtly dismissed our home, our ways. "Lord," I whispered to the night sky, "help me love this girl as my own." I couldn't have known then that my prayers would need to be so much stronger for what was coming. But that slight discomfort in my stomach when she looked down at our home was just the first warning sign of the storm ahead. If this story resonates with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of family, betrayal, and ultimate justice. The wedding was the first real heartbreak. "I think it would be best if we handle the planning ourselves," Tiffany said during one of their weekend visits, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes hard as flint. "We want something contemporary." What she meant was something without me. The wedding I'd dreamed of hosting for my only son, the barn draped in twinkling lights, my sister's famous catering, the quilt I'd sewn with squares from Luke's childhood clothes, all dismissed as too country. I swallowed my hurt and nodded. "Whatever makes you both happy." But it wasn't both of them. I saw how Luke's eyes would drift to me when Tiffany talked about the exclusive downtown venue, the gourmet menu no one in our family would recognize, the strict dress code that made my brother call and ask if he really needed to rent a tuxedo. The night before the wedding, Luke stopped by alone. He found me in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on the small cake I'd baked anyway, not for the reception, just for him. The same chocolate recipe I'd made for every birthday since he was 5. "Mom," he said, his voice catching, "I'm sorry about all this. Tiff just has a specific vision." I cupped his face, this boy who'd once fit perfectly in my arms. "Don't you worry about me, tomorrow is your day." His eyes grew misty. "Dad would have loved to be here." "He is here," I whispered, touching Luke's heart. "And he's so proud of the man you've become." At the ceremony, I was seated in the front row but felt miles away. Tiffany's parents, wealthy investment bankers from Boston, dominated the event. Her mother kept introducing me as Luke's mother rather than by my name. Not once did Tiffany look at me during their vows. At the reception, I was placed at a table far from the wedding party, with distant relatives who barely knew my son. When Luke finally found a moment to dance with me, Tiffany appeared within minutes, tugging him away for important photographs. That night, alone in my too quiet farmhouse, I wept for the first time since my husband's passing. Not just tears of loneliness, but of fear. Fear that I was losing the only family I had left. I kept telling myself it would get better once they settled into marriage. That Tiffany would soften. that Luke would find balance between his new wife and his mother. I tried calling twice the week after their honeymoon. Both times Tiffany answered. "Luke's busy right now," she said. No explanation offered, no message taken. When my birthday came 3 weeks later, the day passed without a call. The card arrived 2 days after, just Luke's signature, none of the personal messages he'd always written before. I stared at the generic greeting card and realized the truth I'd been avoiding. My son was slipping away, one deliberate inch at a time. But I still didn't understand that my kindness would become the very weapon she would use to destroy me. If you're feeling the pain of family division, like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories of healing and justice. Thanksgiving should have been a time of reunion. I'd spent 3 days preparing. Luke's favorite honey-glazed ham, sweet potato casserole with the marshmallow topping he'd loved since childhood, and my mother's secret recipe dinner rolls. I'd even set up the guest bedroom with new linens, hoping they might stay the night. When they arrived, 3 hours late, Tiffany immediately complained about the long drive from the city. "We could have just gone to Aspen with my family," she muttered to Luke, loud enough for me to hear. Luke offered a sheepish smile. "Sorry we're late, Mom. Traffic was bad." I hugged them both, pretending not to notice how Tiffany stiffened. "I'm just happy you're here now." Throughout dinner, I tried engaging Tiffany with gentle questions about her work, their new apartment, their plans for the holidays. Each answer came clipped, distracted as she scrolled through her phone beneath the table. "This ham is delicious, Mom," Luke said, helping himself to seconds. Tiffany looked up from her phone. "Oh, Luke, remember your cholesterol," the doctor said to watch the fatty meats. My fork paused midair. "Luke, are you having health problems? Why didn't you tell me?" "It's nothing, Mom. Luke had a physical last month," Tiffany interrupted. "The doctor said he needs to lose 15 pounds and cut back on all this comfort food." Her eyes flicked dismissively to the spread I'd spent days preparing. "I could make healthier versions next time," I offered, my throat tight. After dinner, as I served the pumpkin pie Luke had always declared was better than heaven itself, Tiffany pushed her plate away untouched. "Actually, we can't stay for dessert," she announced, checking her watch. "We promised to meet my cousin for drinks in the city by 8. Luke looked as surprised as I felt. "We did." "Yes. Remember?" Tiffany's tone left no room for questions. "Jessica and her new boyfriend. You said you wanted to meet him." The light in Luke's eyes dimmed. He looked at me, then back at his half-eaten pie. "I guess we did promise." As they gathered their coats, I pressed a container of leftovers into Luke's hands. "For later," I said quietly. Tiffany intercepted it. "We're really trying to clean eat during the week. But thanks." The door had barely closed behind them when my phone dinged with a text from Luke. "Sorry, Mom. Dinner was great. Love you." Later that night, unable to sleep, I checked social media, something I rarely did. There was Tiffany posting photos from a trendy restaurant downtown. "Perfect Thanksgiving with friends who feel like family. #blessed. No mention of the meal I'd prepared. No photos of Luke and me. Just Tiffany and a group of stylish young people, champagne glasses raised. But the real betrayal came 2 days later, when my neighbor Betty stopped by. "Helen, I saw Luke and Tiffany at the mall yesterday. Tiffany was telling everyone how you refused to make any of Luke's favorite dishes for Thanksgiving, because you're still not accepting her into the family." Poor Luke looked so uncomfortable. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "What?" "I made everything he loves." "That's what I thought." "She made it sound like you deliberately tried to ruin their holiday." As Betty's words sank in, the truth hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just rudeness or city girl adjustment. Tiffany was actively turning people against me, including, most painfully, my own son. And it was in that moment I understood she wasn't who she pretended to be. This story is just beginning to unfold. Hit like and subscribe to find out what happens when this daughter-in-law's true colors are revealed. Christmas came and went with only a brief phone call. New Year's passed with a text message. Winter settled over the farmhouse, and with it, a silence so complete I began talking to the walls, just to hear a human voice. My friends noticed the change. "Haven't seen Luke around lately," Pastor Jim mentioned after Sunday service. "Everything all right?" "They're just busy," I'd say, the lie bitter on my tongue. "City life, you know." But the truth was that Tiffany had built a wall between us, brick by careful brick. She'd created a narrative I couldn't penetrate, the interfering mother-in-law who didn't respect boundaries, who was stuck in the past, who didn't understand their modern lifestyle. When I called, she answered and spoke for Luke. When I texted, responses came hours later, always brief. When I suggested visiting them in the city, there was always some reason why that weekend wouldn't work. Then came the day I found out about Luke's promotion through Facebook. My son, the senior manager now, smiling in a photo at some corporate event, Tiffany radiant beside him in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. 63 congratulatory comments, and I hadn't even known he was up for promotion. With shaking hands, I called him. "Oh, sorry, Mom," he said, sounding genuinely remorseful. "It's been so crazy here. I meant to call. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," I said, fighting back tears. "Thanks. Hey, listen, can I call you back later? Tiff and I are heading to dinner with some clients." "Of course, I love," but he had already hung up. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I drove the hour and a half to their city apartment, a homemade celebration cake carefully boxed on the passenger seat. I didn't call ahead, partly because I wanted to surprise him, partly because I feared Tiffany would find a reason to put me off. The doorman almost didn't let me up. "Mrs. Parker, I don't have you on the approved visitor list. My own son's building and I wasn't approved." "Please," I said. "It's a surprise for his promotion." Something in my face must have moved him. He nodded and directed me to the elevators. Outside their door I heard laughter, Luke's deep chuckle, that had always warmed my heart, mixed with Tiffany's and other voices. I smoothed my hair, straightened my simple dress, and knocked. Tiffany answered, champagne glass in hand. Her smile vanished when she saw me. "Helen, what are you doing here?" Beyond her, I glimpsed a dining room table set with fine china, flowers and more champagne. 8 or 9 people in business attire turned to stare at me, the uninvited country mouse at the city celebration. "I brought a cake," I said lamely, the box suddenly heavy in my hands. "For Luke's promotion." Luke appeared behind her, surprise and something like embarrassment crossing his face. "Mom, we're kind of in the middle of a dinner party. For your promotion," I said. "I wanted to celebrate with you." Tiffany took the cake box with 2 fingers, as if it might contaminate her. "How thoughtful. But we've already ordered a gourmet dessert selection from Bellini's." Luke at least had the grace to look conflicted. "Thanks, Mom, but you should have called first. I wanted to surprise you," I whispered. "Well, you certainly did that," Tiffany said with a tight laugh. Then turning to their guests, "Luke's mother drove all the way from her farm. Isn't that sweet?" The condescension in her voice made my cheeks burn. One woman actually cooed as if I were a child who'd done something adorably naive. "I should go," I managed. "Probably for the best," Tiffany agreed smoothly. "We're discussing quarterly projections and it would all be so boring for you." Luke walked me to the elevator, apologies spilling from his lips. But they were hollow. He was going back to that party, back to the world Tiffany had created where I was an outsider, a relic, an embarrassment. As the elevator doors closed between us, I saw what I feared most beginning to happen. My son, my only child, was becoming a stranger who looked at me with Tiffany's eyes. And what I most feared had begun to happen. Is this story breaking your heart? Subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when the next chapter drops. You won't believe what this daughter-in-law does next. Spring arrived, bringing with it my 65th birthday and retirement from the local library, where I'd worked for 20 years. My colleagues planned a small party, nothing fancy, just cake and punch in the community room with the regulars who'd become like family over the years. "You have to invite Luke," said Marlene, my closest friend. "Retirement is a milestone." So I did, sending a proper invitation 3 weeks in advance. Even adding a note would mean the world to have you there. The RSVP came from Tiffany's email. "We'll try to make it." On the day of the celebration, I kept glancing at the door, hoping. The party was lovely, townspeople bringing small gifts, sharing memories of favorite books I'd recommended, children I'd read to who were now adults themselves. Speech, everyone called, and as I stood to thank them the door opened. My heart leapt, but it was just Mrs. Abernathy arriving late. Luke never came. That evening my phone rang. Luke's face appeared on the screen, and despite everything, hope fluttered in my chest. "Luke, I missed you today." "Yeah, sorry about that, Mom." Tiffany's parents surprised us with tickets to the symphony. Box seats, couldn't pass it up. The casual way he dismissed my retirement celebration, a once-in-a-lifetime event, felt like a slap. In the background I heard Tiffany's voice. "Is that your mother? Tell her about our news." "What news?" I asked. "We're redecorating the apartment," Luke said. "Designer stuff. Tiff has amazing taste." "That's nice," I replied, wondering why that warranted an excited announcement. Actually, Tiffany's voice grew clearer as she apparently took the phone. "We're converting the guest room into a home gym. So much more practical since we never really have overnight guests." The implication was crystal clear. There would be no place for me in their home. "I see," was all I could manage. "Oh, and Helen," Tiffany continued. "Luke mentioned you might be struggling financially now that you're retired. If you need to downsize that big old farmhouse, my friend Rebecca is a real estate agent who specializes in helping seniors transition to retirement communities." I nearly dropped the phone. "Excuse me, I'm not struggling at all. The farm is paid for, and I have my pension plus your father's life insurance." A pause. Then Luke's voice. "Concerned mom, Tiff's just trying to help. You know how isolated that farm is. We worry about you out there alone." "Since when?" I asked, hurt hardening into anger. "You haven't visited in 6 months. Because it's so far," Tiffany cut in. "A retirement community would be closer to us. Plus, think of the money you could make selling all that land." Suddenly, I understood. This wasn't about my welfare. Tiffany had her eye on my property, or rather, on the money it would bring if sold. The land developers had been eyeing farms in our area for years, offering prices that made city folks salivate, but made country people mourn the coming of concrete over cornfields. "The farm stays in the family," I said firmly. "It will go to Luke someday, just as his father wanted." Tiffany's laugh was brittle. "Luke has no interest in playing farmer. Right, honey?" My son's silence was all the answer I needed. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from a law office in the city. Inside was a healthcare proxy form, giving Tiffany and Luke power to make medical decisions if I became incapacitated, along with a note suggesting I consider putting my assets in a trust they would manage. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd nursed Luke through childhood fevers, where I'd held his hands after his first heartbreak, where his father and I had planned our modest dreams. And I realized Tiffany wasn't just isolating me, she was erasing me. But what she did next broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. This story is just heating up. Like and subscribe to see how this mother-in-law finally gets the justice she deserves. The annual Founders' Day picnic had been a cornerstone of our community for generations. Everyone from our small town gathered at the fairgrounds, 3-legged races for the children, pie contests for the bakers, and enough homemade food to feed an army. I'd won the preserves competition 5 years running with my blackberry jam, using berries from bushes my grandmother had planted. This year was special. The committee had asked me to coordinate the heritage display honoring our town's centennial. I'd spent months gathering photos, artifacts, and stories, creating a living timeline of our community's history. Luke had grown up loving this event. As a boy, he'd stuffed himself with corn dogs and cotton candy. Later, as a teenager, he'd volunteered setting up tables, and even after moving away for college, he'd always come home for it. So when he texted that he and Tiffany would attend, my heart soared. Finally, a chance to share something meaningful with them. To remind Luke of his roots, perhaps even to connect with Tiffany through our town's rich history. The morning of the picnic dawned sunny and perfect. I arrived early to finish setting up my display, proudly placing a photo of Luke's great-grandfather, one of the town's founding farmers, at the center. Around noon, I spotted them. Luke looked handsome in casual clothes, a rare sight now that he wore suits daily. Beside him, Tiffany stood out like an exotic bird among sparrows, in designer sunglasses and an outfit more suited to a Hamptons yacht party than a country picnic. I waved eagerly, my spirits lifting as Luke smiled and headed my way. But Tiffany caught his arm, steering him toward the mayor and his wife instead, the most influential people present. Finally, after they'd worked the crowd like politicians, they approached my booth. "Mom," Luke hugged me quickly. "Place looks the same as always." "Some things are worth preserving," I replied, then gestured to my display. "Look," I included the photo of Grandpa Joseph on his first tractor. Luke leaned in, genuine interest lighting his face. "I remember his stories about that old machine. So quaint," Tiffany murmured. not bothering to hide her boredom. She turned to the group gathering around us. You should see the Historical Society exhibits in Boston. They use interactive technology now, not just paper and pushpins. Heat crawled up my neck as several committee members exchanged glances. I'd spent countless hours on this display. We work with what we have, I said quietly. Clearly, Tiffany replied with a tight smile. As more townspeople approached to view the exhibit, many stopped to congratulate me on my retirement and ask about Luke. It was the first many had seen him since he'd moved to the city with Tiffany. Mrs. Wilson, who taught Luke in 4th grade, beamed at him. We're all so proud of you, but we miss seeing you around town. Oh, Luke is much too busy for frequent visits, Tiffany interjected. His career is really taking off in the city. Still, Mrs. Wilson pressed, family is family. My son flies in from California twice a year. Tiffany's smile never reached her eyes. Well, Luke's priorities have evolved. We're focused on building our future, not dwelling in the past. A hush fell over the group. Everyone knew what, or rather who, she meant by the past. Luke shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing to contradict his wife. Pastor Jim tried to ease the tension. Helen's blackberry jam is entered in the contest again this year. No one's been able to beat her recipe. Actually, Tiffany said with a theatrical grimace, Luke's developed some digestive issues with homemade preserves. Too much sugar, not enough quality control. Our nutritionist has him on an all-organic, professionally prepared meal plan now. Every word was calculated to wound, to dismiss not just my jam but our entire way of life, as somehow inferior, unhealthy, beneath them. The final blow came during the community luncheon. I'd saved seats at my table for Luke and Tiffany, but they sat with the mayor instead. When the potluck line formed, I watched as Tiffany physically steered Luke away from my contributed dishes. Later, as I approached their table with a slice of my award-winning apple pie for Luke, Tiffany loudly announced, "We can't stay for dessert. We have dinner reservations at Maison Bleu in the city." The mayor's wife gasped, "That's a 3-month waiting list." Tiffany's father knows the owner, Luke explained, that familiar apologetic look crossing his face when he saw me standing there, pie in hand, forgotten once again. As they made their goodbyes, I overheard Tiffany's parting shot to the mayor's wife. "We'd love to have you visit our place in the city sometime. It would be a refreshing change from all this." Her hand waved dismissively at our town, our traditions, our lives. They left without a proper goodbye to me. That evening, alone on my porch, I allowed myself to weep, not just for the public humiliation, but for the son who had stood by and allowed it to happen. The boy I raised would never have let anyone speak to his mother that way, would never have valued status over sincerity. That night, staring at the ceiling, I made a silent vow. No more turning the other cheek, no more excuses, no more pretending this was just a phase or a misunderstanding. Something had to change. That night, I promised myself that I would never be the same. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to see how this story unfolds. Summer faded into autumn, and with it my hope that things would improve naturally. Luke's calls grew less frequent, more perfunctory. When we did speak, Tiffany was always there, monitoring, interjecting, controlling the narrative. My birthday passed without acknowledgement. When I called Luke the day after, Tiffany answered, "Oh, was that yesterday? We've been so busy with the charity gala. I'm sure Luke meant to call." The dismissal in her voice was the final straw. 40 years of motherhood reduced to an afterthought, an inconvenience in their carefully curated life. That weekend, I made the drive to their city apartment, determination fueling each mile. No more cake, no more surprises, just truth. The doorman recognized me this time. "Mrs. Parker, right, Luke's mom." "Yes," I said, drawing myself up. "I need to see my son." His expression turned apologetic. "I'm sorry, but Miss Tiffany left specific instructions. You're not to be allowed up without prior approval." The blood drained from my face. "Excuse me," her exact words were, "under no circumstances." He continued uncomfortably. "I could lose my job. Could you at least call up? Tell Luke I'm here." He hesitated, then nodded. "Wait here." 5 minutes later, he returned. "I'm sorry, ma'am. They said they're on their way out to a commitment." Through the lobby windows, I could see their building's garage exit. I waited, heart pounding, until Luke's car emerged, Tiffany in the passenger seat. both dressed casually, clearly not heading to any formal event. They had lied rather than face me. Somehow I drove home. The farmhouse that had always been my sanctuary now felt like a prison of memories, every room echoing with Luke's childhood laughter, every wall adorned with photos of a family that no longer existed. That night, my sister Judy called for our weekly chat. "Helen, you sound terrible. What's wrong?" "The dam broke." For the first time I poured out everything. Tiffany's manipulations, Luke's betrayal, the slow systematic erasure of my place in my son's life. Judy was silent for a long moment. "Helen, I need to tell you something. I didn't want to upset you before, but Luke and Tiffany came to David's retirement party last month. David was Judy's husband, Luke's uncle and godfather." "What?" "They told me they were in Mexico that weekend." "No, they were there. Tiffany spent the whole evening telling everyone how worried they are about you, saying you've become erratic, clingy, that you call Luke at all hours making demands." My hands trembled so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. "That's a lie. I barely call him at all anymore, because Tiffany always answers." "I know," Judy said gently. "But Helen," she had everyone convinced. "Even David wondered if you might be developing early dementia. Tiffany mentioned something about you showing up unannounced at important business events. Embarrassing Luke, that was my retirement party. They never showed, so I brought him a cake at his promotion dinner." That's not how she tells it. "According to her, you're unstable, refusing medical checkups, clinging to that crumbling old farmhouse when you should be in assisted living." Assisted living. At 65, active and healthy as I'd ever been. The room spun around me. "She's isolating me so she can control my property," I whispered. "And Luke is letting it happen." "Oh, Helen." Judy's voice broke. "What can I do?" But there was nothing anyone could do. The next morning, I woke to an email from Luke, the first direct communication in weeks. "Mom, Tiffany and I have been talking, and we're concerned about your recent behavior. The unannounced visits, the emotional outbursts, the accusations against Tiffany. It's not like you. We think it might be time to consider your options for the future. I've scheduled a consultation with Dr. Marcus, who specializes in geriatric evaluation. Tiffany and I will accompany you. We've also lined up a tour of Sunny Pines Retirement Village, which has excellent memory care options, should they become necessary. I know this is difficult to hear, but we're doing this because we love you and want what's best." Luke, I read it again through tears of shock and betrayal. My son thought I was losing my mind, or worse, was pretending to think so to appease his wife. I sat at my kitchen table, decades of family photos watching over me, and felt something inside me crumble. The Helen who had always turned the other cheek, who had made excuses for her son's behavior, who had tried to see the good in Tiffany, that Helen died that morning. In her place rose a woman I barely recognized, wounded but determined, heartbroken but clear-eyed. "Enough," I whispered to the empty room. I would not go quietly. I would not let Tiffany erase a lifetime of love and sacrifice. I would fight for the truth. But God has His own plans for revealing the truth. This story has taken a heartbreaking turn. Like this video, and subscribe to see how divine justice begins to unfold. I didn't attend the doctor's appointment Luke had scheduled. Instead, I visited my own physician, Dr. Chen, who had been caring for our family since before Luke was born. "I need you to document that I'm of sound mind," I told her after explaining the situation. "They're trying to make me sound unstable." Dr. Chen's face darkened with concern as I shared the details. When I finished, she reached across her desk and squeezed my hand. "Helen, I've known you for 30 years. You're one of the most level-headed patients I have. Let me handle this." She conducted a thorough cognitive assessment, documenting everything. Before I left, she made copies of my perfect results for my records. "And Helen," she added, "my niece Jessica works at that marketing firm where Tiffany claims to be some high-powered executive. Let me make a call." 2 days later, Luke arrived at my door alone, a rare occurrence that immediately put me on alert. "Mom," he began awkwardly, "you missed the appointment with Dr. Marcus." I gestured for him to sit at the kitchen table. I saw my own doctor instead. "Here are the results of my cognitive assessment." I slid the papers across to him. "Perfectly normal for my age." Luke skimmed the documents, frowning. "This isn't the specialist we chose. No, it's the doctor who delivered you, who treated your childhood asthma, who helped your father through his cancer. I trust her judgment." Luke shifted uncomfortably. "Tiffany thinks I know what Tiffany thinks, I interrupted, my voice steady. The question is, what do you think, Luke? Do you truly believe your mother is losing her mind? Or is it easier to pretend that's the case than to admit what's really happening here? Something flickered in his eyes, doubt, guilt, recognition. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with Tiffany's custom ringtone. He answered immediately, like a soldier reporting to his commander. Yes, I'm here, just talking. No, we haven't discussed that yet. I watched my son, my brave, kind, independent boy, reduced to seeking permission for his own conversation. When he hung up, his shoulders sagged. Mom, we need to talk about the farm. No, I said simply, we don't. The farm stays in the family as your father wished, but it's too much for you to maintain alone. Is that what Tiffany told you to say? Or did you actually look around? I gestured to the immaculate kitchen, the well-maintained grounds visible through the window. I'm not some helpless old woman, Luke. I'm 65, healthy and perfectly capable. He had the grace to look embarrassed. Mom, it's just real estate in this area is booming. You could make a fortune selling to developers. And who would benefit from that fortune, Luke? Would it be me, in the retirement community Tiffany has picked out? Or would it be you two, with your designer apartment and charity galas? That's not fair, he protested weakly. No, what's not fair is my daughter-in-law telling everyone in the family I'm mentally unstable while plotting to get her hands on this property. Luke's face went pale. What are you talking about? Ask your Aunt Judy about the retirement party. Ask her what stories Tiffany has been spreading. Before he could respond, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Dr. Chen, her expression grim but determined. Helen, I hope I'm not interrupting. I have that information we discussed. Luke stood. Mom, who's this? Dr. Chen, my physician. Luke, my son. They exchanged tense greetings before Dr. Chen turned to me. Helen, I spoke with my niece at Meridian Marketing. There's something you and Luke should know. She handed me a printout, the employee directory of Meridian Marketing Group. Tiffany doesn't work there, Dr. Chen said quietly. She never has. According to Jessica, Tiffany interviewed twice but wasn't hired. Yet, she's been telling everyone she's an executive there. Luke snatched the paper from my hands. That's impossible. Tiffany goes to work there every day. She has business cards, client meetings. I watched as the first cracks appeared in the perfect image he had of his wife. Where does she go every day, Luke? Where does the money come from? He shook his head, denial giving way to confusion. She has an income. I see the deposits. From where? I pressed. Luke's phone rang again. Tiffany, her timing impeccable as always. This time, he let it go to voicemail. There must be an explanation, he muttered, more to himself than to us. Dr. Chen's expression was compassionate but firm. Mr. Parker, I've been your family's doctor since before you were born. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't deeply concerned about what's happening. Luke's phone buzzed again. A text from Tiffany. Where are you? We're supposed to meet the Brightons in an hour. He looked up, his face ashen. I need to go. Luke, I said softly, just promise me you'll start asking questions. Real ones. He nodded once, his world visibly tilting on its axis as he walked to his car. After he left, Dr. Chen squeezed my shoulder. The first crack in the facade, Helen. But be careful. When people like Tiffany start losing control, they can become dangerous. I nodded, watching Luke's car disappear down the long driveway. For the first time in months, a small flicker of hope ignited in my chest. Not joy. It was too soon for that, but vindication. The beginning of truth. It was on that day that I realized her mask was beginning to slip. The truth is starting to emerge. Like this video and subscribe to see Tiffany's web of lies continue to unravel. 3 days passed without a word from Luke. I tried not to obsess over the revelation about Tiffany's job, tried not to picture the conversation they must have had. Had she lied her way out of it? Had Luke chosen blindness over truth? On the 4th day, my doorbell rang around noon. I opened it to find a young woman I didn't recognize, stylish but nervous, clutching a designer handbag that looked like something Tiffany would carry. Mrs. Parker? I'm Vanessa Brighton. I need to talk to you about your daughter-in-law. The Brighton. The couple Luke was supposed to meet with Tiffany the day he'd learned about her job lie. I invited her in, served tea, and waited while she gathered her courage. I met Tiffany at a charity event last year, she began. She was so impressive, senior marketing executive, community volunteer, perfect marriage. We became friends. She introduced me to everyone, helped me navigate Boston society. Vanessa's hands trembled around her teacup. 3 months ago, she suggested I invest in a startup. She said it was exclusive, invitation only, guaranteed returns. Her firm was handling the IPO. My stomach dropped. Let me guess, you invested a significant amount. Tears welled in her eyes. $50,000, my inheritance from my grandmother. And now, the company doesn't exist. The investment account she set up? It emptied last week. When I called the bank, they said the transfer was authorized with my password, which only Tiffany knew because she helped me set up the account. I closed my eyes briefly, pieces falling into place. You're not the only one, are you? No, Vanessa whispered. There are at least 5 of us, all women Tiffany befriended, all from wealthy families, all too embarrassed to go public about being scammed. Why come to me? Because I finally did some investigating. Tiffany Parker isn't even her real name, it's Tiffany Winters. She has a record for fraud in Arizona. And Luke, Vanessa hesitated. I don't think he knows. She keeps him completely compartmentalized from her business dealings. My mind reeled, not just a liar, but a criminal. And my son, unwittingly married to a con artist. I have to tell him, I said. Vanessa nodded. That's why I'm here. But Mrs. Parker, be careful. When Melissa Chen threatened to go to the police, Tiffany somehow got photos of Melissa with her ex-boyfriend and sent them to her husband. She destroys anyone who threatens her. After Vanessa left, I sat in my kitchen, paralyzed by the magnitude of what I'd learned. This wasn't just about me anymore. Innocent people were being hurt. I was still sitting there when headlights swept across my windows that evening. Luke's car pulled up, and for once, he was alone. He looked terrible, unshaven, red-eyed, his clothes wrinkled. Without a word, he walked into my arms like he used to do as a child after a nightmare. Mom, he croaked, his voice raw. I don't know what's real anymore. I led him to the couch, holding his hand as the story spilled out. How he'd confronted Tiffany about the marketing job. How she'd cried, claiming she was ashamed of being fired, and couldn't bear to tell him she'd been working at a friend's boutique instead. How he'd believed her until he'd called the boutique owner, who had never heard of Tiffany. It was like pulling on a thread, Luke said hollowly. Once I started looking, everything unraveled. The charity board she claimed to sit on? They've never heard of her. The college sorority sisters she talks about? The sorority exists, but she was never a member. Luke, I said gently, there's more you need to know. I told him about Vanessa, about the investment scam, about Tiffany's real name and criminal record. With each revelation, he seemed to physically shrink. How could I not have seen it? He whispered. How could I have been so blind? Because you loved her, I answered simply. And she was very, very good at what she does. He looked at me, his eyes swimming with tears. She made me believe horrible things about you. That you were unstable, manipulative, trying to control me. I know. All those times I didn't call, didn't visit. She would take my phone, delete your messages. She told me you were fine, just busy. Then she'd tell me you said you didn't want to see us, because you didn't approve of her. Each word was like a balm on wounds I'd carried for so long. I never stopped loving you, Luke. Not for 1 minute. I abandoned you, he choked out. After everything you've done for me, I let her turn me against you. You're here now, I said, squeezing his hand. That's what matters. As the night deepened, we talked. Really talked, for the first time in years. Luke slept in his childhood bedroom, and in the morning we formulated a plan. He would gather evidence of Tiffany's schemes, protect their finances, and consult a lawyer about annulment options, given that their entire marriage was predicated on fraud. As he prepared to leave, Luke hugged me tightly. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Yes, you do, I told him fiercely. You were a victim too. Now go be careful, and come back to me. I watched him drive away, my heart both lighter and heavier. The truth was finally emerging, but I feared what Tiffany might do when cornered. My phone rang that afternoon. Vanessa, her voice tight with panic. Mrs. Parker, Tiffany knows I spoke to you. She's threatening to ruin me if I don't retract everything. Don't worry, I assured her. We're going to make this right. When I hung up, I noticed a text from Luke. Found evidence. Bank records. Fake IDs. Everything. Coming back tonight with the lawyer. Don't call. Battery dying. Love you, Mom. For the first time in months, I smiled a real smile. The pieces were falling into place, the truth revealing itself like the dawn after a long dark night. And then, everything began to make sense. The moment of truth is coming. Like this video and subscribe to see justice finally served. The afternoon crawled by as I waited for Luke's return. I baked his favorite cookies, the simple act of measuring flour and sugar a meditation, a connection to happier times. At 4 o'clock, my doorbell rang. Expecting Luke, I opened it without checking, and found Tiffany on my porch, her face a mask of cold fury. "Hello, Helen," she said, pushing past me into the house. "Isn't this cozy?" The grieving widow, all alone in her decaying farmhouse, plotting to destroy her son's marriage. I stood my ground, fear giving way to a strange calm. "I think you've done that yourself, Tiffany. Or should I call you Tiffany Winters?" Something dangerous flashed in her eyes. "So the old bat's been doing her homework. Cute. What do you want?" She stalked around my kitchen, running her finger along countertops, as if checking for dust. "I want you to understand something. Luke will always choose me. He might be having a momentary crisis of faith, but he'll come back. They always do." "Not this time," I said quietly. "The truth is out, Tiffany. Vanessa Brighton, the fake job, the investment scams. Luke knows everything." She laughed, a brittle, ugly sound. "Do you really think that matters? Men like Luke don't leave women like me for women like you, ever. I'm young, beautiful, exciting. Well, look at you. A relic." "Luke isn't coming back to you because of me," I replied. "He's leaving you because of you." Her smile vanished. "Let me explain how this works. Luke comes home. I cry. Tell him I did it all for us, for our future, that I was desperate to be the wife he deserves. He forgives me. Men always do. Not my son. Your son," she sneered, "is weak, just like his father probably was. Men who let their mothers coddle them always are. Why do you think I chose him? Smart enough to make good money, weak enough to control." Each word was calculated to wound, but I refused to show pain. "You don't know my son at all if you believe that." "I know he signed everything over to me," she said smugly. "Joint accounts, power of attorney, everything. While you've been here growing organic vegetables and reminiscing about the good old days, I've been securing my future, through fraud and theft." She waved a dismissive hand. "Business. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Luke, and tell him you made everything up because you're jealous and lonely. Vanessa Brighton is a disturbed woman with a vendetta against me. You've been confused lately, forgetting things. And why would I do that?" Tiffany pulled out her phone and showed me photos. Luke and me at Christmas years ago, the farm in different seasons, interior shots of my house. "Insurance," she said coldly. "One call, and this place burns to the ground. Maybe with you in it, maybe not. Depends how much you cooperate." My blood ran cold, but I kept my expression neutral. "You'd never get away with it. Wouldn't I?" Faulty wiring in an ancient farmhouse. A depressed widow who couldn't bear her loneliness. Who would question it? As she spoke, I noticed movement through the kitchen window. Luke's car pulling up silently. No headlights. Behind it another vehicle. "You're right about one thing, Tiffany," I said, stalling. "This house does have old wiring. That's why I had cameras installed. Security system. The whole thing records to the cloud." Her eyes darted around, looking for cameras. "You're bluffing." "Am I? You've underestimated me from the beginning. The doddering old farm woman, too simple to see through your schemes. But who do you think taught Luke to be thorough, to verify facts, to trust but confirm? Where do you think he learned integrity, before you dismantled it?" The front door opened, and Luke stepped in, followed by a stern-looking man in a suit and a uniformed police officer. "Hello, Tiffany," Luke said, his voice ice cold. "Or should we call you Rebecca Winters? Or maybe Angela Thompson from the Arizona case? The detective here has some questions about your creative approach to investment management." Tiffany's face contorted from shock to calculation to a desperate attempt at tearful manipulation. "Luke, baby, you don't understand. I did it all for us. These people were exploiting me, using me. Save it." Luke cut her off. "The FBI has your laptop. Turns out identity theft across state lines is a federal offense. As the officer stepped forward with handcuffs, Tiffany's mask finally shattered completely. "You pathetic mama's boy," she screamed at Luke. "You think you can survive without me? You're nothing. She turned you into a spineless country bumpkin, just like her." "No," Luke said calmly. "She raised me to know the difference between love and exploitation. I just forgot for a while." The officer led a still raging Tiffany out to the waiting police car. The man in the suit, Agent Davis, from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, explained that they'd been tracking Tiffany's activities for months. "Your son's evidence was the final piece we needed," he told me. "You should be proud. He risked a lot coming forward." After the agents left with their notes and evidence, Luke and I sat at the kitchen table in stunned silence. The confrontation we'd feared was over. The truth fully revealed at last. "I recorded everything," Luke finally said. "From the moment she started threatening you. That's why I texted instead of calling. I didn't want to risk her hearing my plan." "You always were clever," I said, squeezing his hand. "Not clever enough," he said bitterly. "She stole from so many people, Mom. Using my name, my reputation. Some of them were friends who trusted me. And you'll make it right," I assured him. "That's who you are." For the first time in months, years maybe, I saw my real son again. Not the corporate climber Tiffany had sculpted, but the boy with his father's integrity and compassion. But what she did after her arrest, no one could have predicted. The drama continues. Like and subscribe to see the final fallout of Tiffany's schemes. The weeks following Tiffany's arrest were a blur of legal meetings, victim statements, and painful revelations. The scope of her deception was breathtaking. Not just financial fraud, but an entire fabricated identity. Even her wealthy Boston parents were fictional characters she'd invented to impress Luke. With each new discovery, I watched my son struggle with shame and self-recrimination. How had he not seen it? How had he been so thoroughly deceived? Because she was a professional, FBI agent Davis explained during one of our meetings. Rebecca Winters, her real name, has been doing this for years. She studies her marks, becomes what they want, and exploits their vulnerabilities. In your case, Luke, she saw a successful young man who valued family but was reaching for something beyond his roots. And I fell for it completely, Luke said hollowly. The legal process moved with surprising speed, propelled by the mountain of evidence and Tiffany's prior record. Victims came forward from 3 states. Other men she'd married and defrauded, women she'd befriended and betrayed, businesses she'd embezzled from. Luke insisted on making financial restitution to those harmed during his marriage, even though legally he was considered another victim. "It's the right thing to do," he said simply. I recognized in that moment how much he was his father's son. The divorce papers were filed, citing fraud and criminal activity. The beautiful apartment, furnished with stolen money, was sold to repay victims. Luke moved into a modest rental, shedding the trappings of the life Tiffany had crafted. Then came the day of Tiffany's sentencing hearing. Luke asked me to accompany him, though neither of us relished facing her again. The courtroom was packed with victims and reporters drawn to the sensational case of the society swindler, as the papers had dubbed her. When Tiffany was led in, I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. Her prison jumpsuit and bare face made her look younger, smaller, almost vulnerable. Until she saw us. Then her eyes hardened with the same cold hatred I'd seen in my kitchen. The judge was unmoved by her attorney's claims that she suffered from mental illness, that she was herself a victim of childhood trauma. The evidence was too overwhelming, the pattern too calculated. "Rebecca Winters, you have demonstrated a persistent pattern of predatory behavior, exploiting the trust and goodwill of others for personal gain," the judge declared. "This court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison and orders restitution to your victims in the amount of $1.3 million. A gasp rippled through the courtroom, not at the severity of the sentence, but at the amount she'd managed to steal over the years. As they led her away, Tiffany looked directly at Luke and me, her face twisted with malice. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Not by a long shot." Outside the courthouse, surrounded by reporters, Luke took my hand and faced the cameras with quiet dignity. "My mother taught me that character reveals itself in how you respond to adversity," he said. I hope to honor her example by making amends to anyone harmed by my former wife's actions. Beyond that, I have no comment." His words brought tears to my eyes, not just for the public acknowledgement, but for the man I saw emerging from the ashes of this ordeal, stronger, humbler, reconnected to his true self. That night, at the farmhouse, we sat on the porch swing, as the sunset painted the fields gold, the same view that had nourished generations of our family. "I'm selling the city condo," Luke said quietly. "I never really liked it anyway." "Where will you go?" I asked. He gestured to the old caretaker's cottage at the edge of our property, his father's project years ago, never quite finished. "I was thinking, if you wouldn't mind a neighbor." "The cottage needs work," I said, my heart swelling with hope. "I'm good with my hands," he replied, with a small smile. "Remember who taught me to fix things?" We sat in companionable silence, as twilight deepened around us. The farm that Tiffany had coveted, had tried to steal, would now shelter both of us, mother and son, healing together. 2 days later, a letter arrived from prison, Tiffany's familiar handwriting on the envelope. Luke started to throw it away unopened. "Wait," I said, "we should know if she's making threats." Inside was a single page, its contents both shocking and strangely pitiful. "Luke and Helen, you think you've won. Maybe you have, for now. But remember this. Everything I did because the world taught me that's how survival works. While you were growing up safe on your precious farm, I was learning that nothing is free, and no one can be trusted. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even want it. But know this, in another life, with different choices, I might have eventually loved the farm. I might have even meant it when I called you Mom." Rebecca. Luke crumpled the letter. "More manipulation, perhaps," I said. "Or perhaps the closest thing to honesty she's capable of." He shook his head, unable to find compassion yet, and that was okay. Healing would come in its own time. That spring, Luke moved into the renovated cottage. Slowly he reconnected with old friends, made amends where needed, and rediscovered the simple pleasures of country life. The corporate executive softened into a man balanced between two worlds, still successful in his career, but grounded in family and community. As for Tiffany, Rebecca, her threats proved empty. From behind prison walls, she could no longer hurt us. The woman who had nearly destroyed my son, who had tried to erase me from existence, was powerless now. Yet even after everything, I chose forgiveness. The story is reaching its powerful conclusion. Like and subscribe to see the final chapter of this emotional journey. A year has passed since the day of Tiffany's sentencing. The seasons have turned full circle, bringing healing with each harvest and planting. This morning, I sit at my kitchen table, the same table where so much of our family history has unfolded, and watch through the window as Luke tends the vegetable garden we replanted together. His hands, once soft from city living, now show the honest calluses of working the land. Not full-time, he still commutes to his executive job 3 days a week, but enough to reconnect him to his roots. The cottage glows with fresh paint and new life. Sometimes on summer evenings, I hear laughter drifting from its porch. Luke and friends, or occasionally a woman he's been seeing, a kind-hearted local teacher who grew up just one town over. They're taking things slowly, mindfully. Trust once broken, rebuilds in its own time. The scandal faded from the news cycles months ago. Tiffany, Rebecca, serves her sentence far away, her power over us diminished to nothing more than an occasional difficult memory. Luke received her one letter, read it, then burned it without sharing its contents. "Some doors need to stay closed," was all he said. "I understand. Forgiveness doesn't mean allowing toxic people back into your life. What remains is the wisdom earned through pain, the lessons that only adversity can teach. I've learned that love doesn't always protect us from deception. That good people can be manipulated by experts in exploitation. That family bonds, though tested, can emerge stronger from the fire." Luke has learned to trust his instincts again, that quiet inner voice that Tiffany taught him to silence. He's learned the difference between ambition and greed, between status and worth, between appearance and substance. Together we've learned that time reveals all truths eventually. That patience is not passive, but a form of action. That standing firm in your integrity will ultimately be vindicated. Yesterday, a letter arrived from Vanessa Brighton. She's started a support group for victims of confidence schemes, helping others rebuild their lives and their trust. "Your strength inspired me," she wrote. When I felt foolish and ashamed, you showed me that being deceived doesn't define your worth. Her words reminded me of something my mother used to say: the measure of your character isn't in never falling, but in how you rise after the fall. This morning, Luke brought over coffee and sat across from me at the kitchen table, just as he used to do before work, when he was younger. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching the silver now prominent in my hair, illuminating the new lines of wisdom around his eyes. "I've been thinking, Mom," he said. "Remember how Dad always wanted to start a small foundation to help local kids go to college?" I nodded, my heart warming at the memory of my husband's generous spirit. "I'd like to do that, in his name, using part of my salary that would have gone to the lifestyle Tiffany wanted. Something good should come from all this, don't you think?" And that's when I knew with absolute certainty that we had not just survived, but triumphed. Not in wealth or retribution, but in reclaiming our true selves, our values, our legacy. The farm will continue, nurturing future generations as it has nurtured us. The lessons will endure, passed down like the family recipes and stories. Today I understand that motherhood is more than just giving life. It's standing firm in truth even when the world conspires to make you doubt yourself. It's loving fiercely enough to let go, and remaining steadfast enough to be there when your child finds their way home again. I've learned that time is the great revealer, that patience outlasts deception, that kindness is never weakness, but the deepest form of strength. To anyone who has felt the sting of betrayal, who has been made to question their own reality, who has watched helplessly as someone they love is led astray, take heart, stand in your truth, wait with dignity. The masks always fall eventually. And when they do, be ready with open arms for those returning to themselves, to authenticity, to love that doesn't manipulate or control, but simply holds space for truth to blossom. This is my legacy as a mother, not perfect protection, but perfect perseverance. Not shielding my child from all pain, but showing him how to find meaning in it. Not fighting his battles, but equipping him to emerge victorious from his own. Have you ever stood firm in your truth, while others doubted you? Have you weathered the storm of betrayal and emerged stronger? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be the light someone else needs in their darkest hour. And if this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that truth, and love always prevail in the end.